where are the American insurgents? I look at the U.S.'s strategy, military, which is primarily a military strategy, so that's already one part of the strategy that we should be aware of um, in Afghanistan. And it's beyond the fact that we never really clarified why we went there, and therefore we're sort of goalless, although we give a lot of political rhetoric garbage to the idea that we're somehow nation building, but we don't sort of define what nation building means. Now, I know for a lot of people in the United States, patriotism is somehow tied to blindly following the government, supporting our troops. Well, I therefore would like to offer the disclaimer that I support our troops. I have veterans in my family since World War One, at least, and perhaps even before, since we were certainly there during the Civil War. I may even have veterans in that war, or even the Revolutionary War. Of course, I wouldn't know, but from at least World War One and World War Two, and Vietnam. I was actually visiting my uncle when Operation Desert Storm started in '90. So I know how to support troops. And I support them by saying that, A, we should bring them home and not just send them to battle and even ill-equipped and then even abandon them once they are veterans. So please don't go there. I love America and I am a patriot, and this is why I make these videos talking to other people, including and perhaps especially other Americans, because there are a couple of things that we need to think about when we talk about our strategy in Afghanistan. And I know that it's an unpopular idea, but what about peace? I mean, we talk about soft power, and if you think about the way that we worship people and treat them as martyrs, look at Jesse Jackson. Look at what how Jesse Jackson and Bill Clinton have walked into war zones, the axis of evil, according to George Bush, and negotiated peace. These are American insurgents. Do you see what I'm saying? Jesse Jackson is an American insurgent. Bill Clinton is an American insurgent. He just walked over, and I think Hillary Clinton has the potential to be an American insurgent, which is why I'm so happy that she has agreed to study diplomacy under the leadership of Barack Obama, because there's still yet that she has to learn about this fundamental idea of peace. And it's important, Jimmy Carter, an American insurgent, it's important for me to bring up those people because I do think that it bears a tracing back to the Civil Rights Movement. It did not die with Martin Luther King Jr. Unfortunately, the chaos afterwards, the assassination, the despondency, the despair that I think many Americans felt, that A, change would never come, and B, no matter what we did, white supremacy would just continue to just slice us out of the picture. And when I say us, I mean American insurgents, people who are willing to speak up on the side of justice, regardless of what your color is. And of course, this happened after emancipation. I mean, remember, we have this glorious document, the Emancipation Proclamation, the 13th and 14th Amendments, but all of that, 13th and 14th Amendments is it the 13th one that says that we're human? Is more so used by corporations, and Jim and Jane Crow grew out of emancipation. So, I mean, again, in an era of terrorism, sheer terrorism. Remember, because the terrorism of whites against blacks didn't happen under the system of slavery, in the sense that slavery is itself terrorizing for all involved, but to not just brutalize but annihilate black bodies only happened after slavery, because of course as slaves were really valuable, but as Negroes not willing to work for free, how dare you, on plantations, we could be annihilated, which is why so many people abandoned rural life. And so it isn't that Americans have this lust for urbanness, and I'm getting back to where this is going, so bear with me, but that we have a lust for life. And that's why many people abandon rural life, and it's in the South, not just because the North was so glorious, but it's also why people are migrating back. And that brings me back to this point of peace and reconciliation and why we should think about a strategy in Afghanistan to say that if that thread of American life didn't die with Martin Luther King, where is that today? Barack Obama, of course, claims to pick up the mantle. So how can we hold him accountable to say that war is not our strategy? War is not how we do things. War is never how we, and and peacekeeping at the most is how we would show force and coercion, which would mean that we would go through the very dense bureaucracy of the UN and of course not act independently as George Bush did. It brings us back to the root of to the root of that, which is again not what I want to dispute here, whether or not George Bush should have acted on his own, but whether or not war is the way that we do things. Again, George Bush, history is history. George Bush did what he did. He's a warmonger. His whole cabinet condoned on them. They're warmongers. You can disagree with me on that, Fox people, but they sent us, they, carted us into war. They, sent people to brutalize and beat each other. They, are the ones who say that they're the bullies. They're the school bully. They're the, you playing Foursquare and all of a sudden some big kid comes in, blah, 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 blah. That's who they were. That's how we have used power. So the question is, barring that, the question is, how can we live for today? How can we say from now on? And if we have this moral authority, which Barack Obama keeps insisting upon, his very first act, his very first signature as president was to say that he was going to close Guantanamo. He's opening up the government to not keep so many secrets, making it more difficult for the government to just say, that's an act of, if we release certain documents, then it will, compromise security, and therefore certain lawsuits that even private citizens, let alone groups of people, corporations, incorporations, in, any sort of incorporated body or collective of people, they can just stop lawsuits that those citizens could have against the government just by saying that all the evidence you need is secret. So Barack Obama, again, in creating this ethos of government transparency, of creating trust between the government so that he can, of course, grow the government, healthcare being one of them. If you can trust the government, then the government can be bigger and actually do something. And I think that it's very hypocritical for people to suggest that we should have a small government, but we should be warmongers. So basically, it means that the bulk of our government is warmongering, is bullying, and that's what the old Reaganomics was. So, I mean, I think we really have to consider what is it that we're moving, the totality of things that we're moving away from with this new president. It isn't just, when he's saying change, he is saying change. Do you know what I mean? When he is saying change, he's not saying we're going to move from, coming up on him from the left to coming up on him from the right. That's not a new strategy. A new war strategy is not a new strategy. And so what I'm saying is, how would Dr. King, if plain and simple, if Dr. King were alive today, what would he be saying about war? And when I brought up the American insurgents, it's to say that look how many people put their lives on their bodies on the line in this country, and I'll get back to that, but also abroad. I mean, you look at all those people who are using violence to put their bodies on the line, and we call them insurgents. Look at the civil rights movement here. These are insurgents who put their bodies on the line. Look at SNCC. Look at these even young people who just said, I'm just going to sit here. What if more, we think that we look at these icons, these Jimmy Carters, these Jesse Jacksons, these Martin Luther Kings, these Malcolm X's, these Bill Clintons, and we assassinate them. We martyr them like Jesus. As opposed to learning from them, engaging them, encouraging more of us to rise. I mean, we could have Americans all over the world engaging in diplomacy. What if the Peace Corps had the budget of just one of the military branches, let alone, our military industrial complex? Think about that. Electronic food